make any promises, right? Right?
What was that? Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing the new Netflix documentary, The Truth About Jussie Smollett, which revisits and unpacks the highly controversial case surrounding the actor. This is one of the most polarizing cases in recent memory. People have very strong feelings about it. Most people are watching this documentary to confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is indeed guilty. The documentary pretty much interviews everyone from Jussie, these two scamming brothers, the police, pretty much anyone who has had contact with this case. It is an incredibly well shot documentary, often lingering on its subjects, especially Jussie, when they don't realize the camera is on them, subtly casting doubt on their story. And I love how the camera angles continue to change. It's almost as if the documentary is trying to make each, like, if we shoot it from this angle, is it believable? How about this? Is this working? Like, they're doing their best to make everyone look somewhat credible. And I feel like everyone interviewed in this documentary looked like they were hiding a secret, or they had a gun to their head. I thought the scenes at the laundromat were especially well done, symbolizing the rising tension as things get messier and harder to clean up, both literally and metaphorically. The documentary very much wants you to focus on how things are being said, not so much what is actually being said. And because of this, everyone looks guilty. The documentary, before we get into it, is incredibly cinematic. I felt like I was hearing about the case for the very first time. It is expertly constructed to keep viewers hooked from start to finish. The team that worked on this documentary also worked on the Tinder Swindler as well as Don't F with Cats. So if you're looking for something to watch, those two documentaries will also send you into a spiral. I don't think the documentary moves the needle at all. If anything, it raises more questions than it can possibly answer. And I think two things can be true at the same time. Jussie fabricated a story and the police are indeed corrupt. Unfortunately, the law did nothing to provide closure. If anything, it highlights how the failure of police and prosecutors to act appropriately allowed Jussie's story to persist and ultimately become the subject of a documentary. When a case involves high-profile celebrities, the scrutiny is much greater. Even the smallest mistake gets magnified and highlighted as proof of corruption and police incompetence. And I felt the documentary did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was look at the case from every possible angle. And I totally forgot about this case, but looking back, it actually sounds a lot more absurd than when we remember it. According to Jussie Smollett, he left his apartment in downtown Chicago to get food from a Subway sandwich shop. On his way back, he claims he was approached by two white men who yelled racial and homophobic slurs at him, allegedly shouting, "This is MAGA country." They not only physically attacked him, but they placed a noose around his neck. They then poured a chemical substance which appeared to be bleach. He explains in the documentary how prior to the attack he had been receiving threatening letters which foreshadowed what was going to happen. He later explains how prior to the attack he was receiving a number of threatening letters foreshadowing the crime before it occurred. When police officers arrived to Jussie's apartment, he still had the noose around his neck, and for some reason his creative director was there. Now, watching this footage again and seeing the Subway bag that was intact and this decision to leave the noose around his neck. In the documentary, he mentions how he took the noose off but only put it back on for police to see. Now, whose decision that was and why they thought it was a good idea. One of the points that keeps coming up in this case is how cold Chicago was at this time. And the idea that he would go outside just to get food didn't really sit right with people. He claims that he had a habit of taking these nighttime walks, but he never really elaborates why. Because it's so cold, people only go outside if they absolutely have to, or if they don't really want to be seen doing something that they shouldn't be doing. One of the officers referred to the noose as a prop, like the way that Jussie was just wrapping it up after the police arrived. And I felt that was a very accurate description. At the time, tensions were running high politically, and so it seemed plausible that something like this could happen, and also equally possible that someone would fabricate a story like this. Jussie was very careful not to criticize Fox regarding these death threats he was receiving, likely because he's still a working actor. But according to the Nigerian brothers, Fox did not take these threats very seriously, and his reason for wanting to stage this attack is to become the poster boy for police brutality. Part of this documentary explores the media's ethical failure to properly cover this case as it unfolded. Once the public caught wind of the story, It blew up on an international scale, and the story was much bigger than anyone had anticipated. And suddenly, the city was facing some of the worst press coverage in their history. And the documentary raises a very provocative question. Was that bad press enough of a motive for the police to potentially stage a crime in order to protect their reputation? Because Jussie never actually changes his story, he's forced to add more details. And these new details are meant to make his story seem more credible. The only thing proving Jussie staged his own hate crime are these two brothers, whose credibility is arguably worse than Bernie Madoff. Although DNA from two men was found on the news, it doesn't actually match the two brothers. On top of that, there are no witnesses, no forensics. There's nothing actually proving that these two brothers were at the scene. Now, because of the weather and the time of the attack, it wasn't that difficult for police to narrow down suspects. The only smoking gun the police seem to have is this rideshare, which was apparently the only rideshare and I guess car in the area during this time. And the documentary shifts between Jussie and these brothers, contrasting their accounts and pretty much leaving it up to the audience to decide who's lying or if any of them are even telling the truth. Now, there's a difference between being an extra on a show and being friends with one of the stars, and this was way too big of a coincidence for police to ignore. One of the standout scenes is when Bola is describing his friendship to Jussie. He says that he was friends with him before his brother, and he really believed they were close. He says, quote,
I was important. I'm friends with this star. I'm not just an extra.
Jussie claims he texted the brothers in order to have them traffic these herbal steroids from Nigeria. Now, watching how the documentary framed this statement, I don't even think they believed him. Now, I don't know, is there a herbal steroid that reduces belly fat only found in Nigeria? Like, listening, I don't know, my initial instinct hearing that was that's not what you asked them to do. And I don't think the context Jussie is adding is really helping. Now, the check he cut the brothers could have just been for personal training. That's not really a smoking gun. And I think my biggest issue with these brothers is that I don't really buy that they would commit such a crime for such a low amount of money, especially seeing how they've spent their 15 minutes of fame much longer. Like, they've turned this into a business. It also seems like the brothers did a lot of favors for Jussie. Now, when it comes to the text messages, I personally would never ever give up my phone to the police, and that has nothing to do with cooperating or not cooperating. Given the history of the police in this city, it's better to be safe than sorry. However, after learning that Ola is a convicted felon, it does feel like maybe these brothers have done favors for Jussie that have crossed legal lines. Now, the absurdity of this crime from start to finish is really hard to believe. I mean, you could not write a script this bad. And I think what's bothering people is, why on earth would you stage a crime in this way and think no one would find out? Now, this was my first time seeing the brothers. To be honest, I wasn't that locked into this case, and I didn't believe a word that these brothers were saying. And I'm not sure if the issue was Jussie's lawyers, but I just don't understand how they were credible to a jury. First off, how on earth are they not in jail? Ola, at the very least, should be behind bars. And I think I was totally mind blown. I missed this when all of this happened, but this whole press run was dystopian. The biggest issue with this case is motive. Jussie, there's really no reason for him to commit this crime unless he really is an egomaniac. The brothers claim that Jussie wanted to be the face of police brutality. Other people say it has to do with his salary from Empire. However, the only one in this entire story that would have reason to lie is Ola. Not only is he a convicted felon, but he was actually accused of attempted murder. And when they raided his home, he wasn't found with just one gun. This dude had a stash of weapons. And the only reason you'd confess to a crime you didn't commit is if you committed a much bigger crime. I don't see how Ola, with his past convictions, could have walked. And when you take in the fact that they're so hungry for fame and fortune, I don't see how anyone could have taken this seriously, let alone the press. The fact that they couldn't even remember the name of their rage bait book, like, what was it called? The Dangerous Need.
Bigger than Jussie, the modern day, what is
The
it?
disturbing need for a modern day lynching.
These two will say anything for a paycheck. I did think it was strange that the brothers waited a very long time before they flipped on Jussie. I thought the interrogation room scenes were especially damning. Like, why was Bola laughing so hard? Who helped them construct this story? And I wish Kim Fox, the prosecutor at this time, was interviewed for this documentary. She was a very important missing piece. I felt like everyone in this documentary just wanted to be on camera. Like, the whole time I was watching this, I'm like, where are the adults? And it just felt like they couldn't wait to just spill the tea. And the person who has the most tea is missing. At the time, Kim Fox's office dropped all charges against Jussie after he forfeited his $10,000 bond and completed community service. Fox defended this decision, stating that such resolutions were common for non-violent offenders and that Jussie had been treated no differently than any other defendant. In this context, it's not really about whether or not he did it. The state had agreed to make a deal with Jussie, and once that deal is made, they can't really go back on it. And for that reason, they can't try him again because double jeopardy attaches. Once the charges were dropped, Jussie doubled down, and it seems like Kim and her office really wanted this to quietly go away, but Jussie was really doing the most. And because he was pushing, the city really had no choice but to save their reputation. And even though the conviction was overturned, I do think the trial was enough to revive their reputation. The trial was pretty much a show trial. The whole point was to confirm his guilt. And by that point, no one really believed him, and any and all credibility he had was destroyed. And I wish the documentary explained how ruthless Chicago politics is, because you just get a sense that there was a lot of backstabbing going on behind the scenes. It tries to give us a glimpse through these seasoned reporters who cover crime in the city. And one of these reporters in Chicago mentions how when he called the police for a tip, they told him on the record that they were skeptical. And this reporter was saying he had never gotten a lead like that from the police department. Like, it was quite shocking. And I feel like the documentary, at the very least, does a great job of weaving in reasonable doubt. And it does so very calmly. The makers of this documentary are very aware that people have strong feelings. And so it slowly starts to seep in doubt towards the second half. Once you've climatized to the entire case and your initial feelings about Jussie have kind of calmed down. Towards the end of the documentary, we're introduced to two witnesses who actually corroborate Jussie's story. These two witnesses, at the very least, cast doubt on the police department's ability to conduct a fair investigation. Now, I don't know why they had one of those witnesses sitting at a laundromat doing laundry. Like, the visuals of this documentary were insane, but they did work. The two witnesses stand firm that they saw a white man, and the security guard is where we have issues because he is very sure he saw a white man. He remembers putting a flashlight to this man's face. And so he is saying, I saw very clearly that this was a white man. Now, where the plot thickens is when independent journalists try to verify his account. And these 10 seconds could potentially show a white man. And I was waiting for these 10 seconds. I thought by the end of the documentary, we would get these 10 seconds, but we never do. And I think what I found very frustrating about the documentary is that it keeps teasing the smoking gun. And it kind of butters you up, but it never finishes you off. And you're like, where are these 10 seconds? Now, the second witness claims not only did she see a white man, but she saw that he was carrying something that looked like a rope. It's one thing to try and discredit a witness. However, putting pressure on them to identify the wrong man in a lineup is absolutely, that's clearly police corruption. One of the journalists interviewed in the documentary notes how the police officers who arrived at Jussie's house have a long history of complaints and accusations, some more serious than others. One of the officers who showed up was even accused of using a homophobic racial slur at a black man. I thought ending with the two journalists was very smart on the documentary's part. It strategically introduces new evidence to challenge your perception of what happened, not so much trigger it. I especially enjoyed listening to that British journalist because she was very sure of his innocence. I mean, she could not wait to do this documentary. And I think her issue and why she became obsessed with the case is because it just doesn't make sense. Why would someone stage a crime this elaborate and truly believe they would not get caught? Because we don't have this missing 10 seconds, we're stuck with this surveillance footage that frankly shows nothing of value. I thought having each participant look at the footage and ask whether or not they see a white man or a black man was super brilliant, because it perfectly summarizes how I felt at the end of this documentary, which was extremely confused. Depending on what you want to believe, you could have seen the Loch Ness Monster in that footage. I mean, there was just nothing concrete. And I think the video is simply too pixelated to determine anything 100%. Now, I do think Jussie took a risk by participating in this documentary. When the documentary starts, you pretty much can't stand him. But towards the end, you really don't know how you feel about him.
I have such doubts.
Especially in contrast to every other participant in this documentary, who honestly comes off extremely shady. And I think this documentary did a good job of using Jussie to show how the police mishandled his case and why public trust in the police is so fractured. Now, regarding the brothers, these are professional scammers. When you find out that Ola is a convicted felon who has been accused of attempted murder, I mean, that pretty much changes a lot. And I feel like Jussie's lawyers should be ashamed, because I'm sorry to say, if you don't believe Jussie, I don't see how you can believe anything coming out of these two brothers' mouths. I mean, they have been on this press run for so long, and you can tell in this documentary, no longer cared about even sounding credible. And this whole book, Beyond Jussie, I guess their plan is to blame it on the Democratic Party. They are milking this for everything that it's worth. And to be honest, they have gotten a lot of bang for their buck. Now, if you were super triggered at the start of this documentary, how did you feel by the end? Now, be honest, be kind, and comment down below. But I do think this documentary is definitely worth a watch. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.